So here we have the cell cycle. The cell cycle, which is made up of the G1, the S, and the G2 phase. And that's interphase, along with mitosis and cytokinesis, which make up the actual actively dividing part of the cell cycle. So to begin, here we have the G1 phase. G actually stands for gap, okay, although typically what we think of as the G is growth. It is a good way to remember what's actually happening, but it's not the actual name of the phase. It's the gap 1 phase. So in the gap 1 phase of interphase, we have, of course, growth of the actual cell to allow for synthesis to basically occur within the cell. But it all falls under the basic umbrella of preparing for the next phase. Okay? And that's essentially what's happening in both the gap phases. It's just a preparation phase for the following phase. Here we have the gap 1, which is the preparation phase for DNA synthesis during the S phase. So with the G1 phase, it gathers all the proper materials to be able to undergo synthesis of the DNA during the S phase of the cell cycle. Okay. Now there are checkpoints that are located along the entire cell cycle. The first one is the restriction point, which is basically located right there. And that tells us basically if the cell is able to undergo replication or not. If it's not able to, then we actually go into a side phase called the G sub 0 phase. And so this phase is actually almost like a dormant phase for the cell. Okay? So in this dormant phase, the cell continues to gather all the materials needed to undergo DNA synthesis. And once it is ready, it leaves the G sub 0 phase and enters the S phase. Okay, it passes that restriction point and continues on through the rest of the cell cycle. Now, there are cell types that don't leave the G sub 0 phase, and there's cell types that completely bypass the G sub 0 phase. For example, intestinal cells completely bypass the G sub 0 phase because they need to be replaced constantly. While the nervous tissue and muscle tissue, those types of cells that are included in those types of tissue tend to stay in the G sub 0 phase the entire lifespan of the organism, or for the most part, the entire lifespan of the organism. And so, with these types of cells, we can tell with common examples like paralysis. When we have paralysis, we're not able to basically repair the nerves that extend off into the legs. So we're not able, being that we're not able to repair them, we're not able to actually walk. Okay, and this just all falls back to the basic concept of the cell cycle and not being actually ready to undergo DNA replication. They're basically not meant to undergo DNA replication in muscle cells and the nervous cells, okay, at least for the most part. Now, once we pass that restriction point, we move into the S phase, and this is where DNA replication occurs. And DNA replication, as far as the molecular aspect of it, we will talk about that in chapter 14, DNA, the genetic material. So, DNA replication actually occurs during this phase, and then going past this phase, we go into the G2 phase. Again, the gap 2, not growth, but we do have more growth occurring during this stage. So in the gap 2 phase, the idea is you're able to gather all the materials necessary to undergo cellular division. Okay, so here we gather all the materials to be able to condense our chromosomes, amongst other activities that need to happen during cellular division. Okay, now going to the actual process of cellular division, we have the steps prophase, prometaphase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then we have the process of cytokinesis. Okay, and in the next video we'll talk more in depth as far as the individual differences between each one of the stages.